Call this special council meeting to order, and I know this is kind of odd, but I think we should still do the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The clerk, please call the roll.
Hare.
Here.
Hazeltine.
Present.
Lamb.
Here.
Rose.
Here.
Shields.
Here.
Simpson.
Here.
Coin.
Here. It's not normal that we have special council meetings in the middle of the summer when generally council's on break, but this is a special circumstance. And first I want to apologize for everybody who had to come today. Today we're going to be talking about unpaid utility accounts. And I just want to go over some of the history and how this arose and what this means. The utility accounts, as far as water, the city of Medina provides water to all the city residents in the city of Medina. And, we provide that by ordinance. There's fees associated with it. There's the cost of the water that we pay for, that we pass on to the customer. And it's all run through the Water and Utilities Department, the Sanitation Department, and the Finance Department. The Finance Department provides the bills, and I'm sure that most of you here today and others who are not has called them once they received this letter, this certification letter. Now, with the water accounts, what we normally do is every year we look at the unpaid accounts, and there's various reasons these accounts could be unpaid. Some people could file bankruptcy. Some people, it may have gone to sheriff's sale. They may have left. There may have been a death in the family. There may have been people that just didn't pay. There's various reasons why water bills aren't paid. And usually every year by ordinance, we have a law in the city that requires the finance director to certify the unpaid assessments. And when I say certified, the water account, like in every community, unlike electric and unlike natural gas, runs with the land. Now what that means is that if you have an unpaid water bill, it's not to you personally, it's against your property, the property that is owned by the individual. So in certain situations we have here, somebody bought a piece of property, they went on, sold the property, somebody else bought it, and there was a water bill that wasn't paid 3 property owners ago. That's because the water bills run with the property and don't go with the individual, unlike gas bills and electric bills, which they don't go against your property. Now, when I mentioned earlier that a lien is created with the water account, when I say a lien, once you sign up for a water account, you have an obligation to pay those bills. The certification is a little different. A certification is the letter you receive that if you don't pay the water bill, a lien of record, meaning the county auditor and recorder's office will show on your tax duplicate that you have an assessment, a lien filed against you, that you have to pay your water bill. So if an individual tried to sell their house or something, that would show up of public record. Now that doesn't absolve everybody from, usually when they purchase properties, whether it be a landlord, whether it be an individual, they usually have to call the city. As a real estate lawyer, what generally happens is that you hire a broker, you get a title company, because most people don't work in that industry. They don't understand all the rules. That's why we have these professionals that hopefully tell us these rules. And I can guarantee you that that didn't happen in some of these cases. But when you buy a house, usually in the purchase agreement, there is a provision that says that the title company will withhold $200, $250 for unpaid water bills. That's pretty typical. That's standard in the industry. Every residential real estate purchase agreement I've ever seen that's done by a broker on a broker form has that provision in it. And every title company generally has a provision that you sign at closing that says, I acknowledge that, we're withholding this money from a seller's perspective for unpaid water bills. Now it's up to the title company or up to the broker and ultimately up to the buyer, because in Ohio we're what's called a caveat emptor state, which is buyer beware, that you're supposed to call the city and ask the question, are there any unpaid water bills on this property? Now most people don't know they have to do that. Nobody ever told them they have to do that. So that's kind of a difficult question. But the fact that you don't know, it doesn't mean it doesn't have to happen. So this kind of arose too with some people, I would imagine, that we had in the list, that they just didn't know. They bought the house. Nobody told them that there was an unpaid water bill. Everything was going great. and a month ago, you receive a letter in the mail saying, if you don't pay this water bill, we're going to put a lien on your property. No, getting that letter, I'd be upset too, right? I mean, that's what's going on here. I don't know anything about this. The certification should have happened, the last certification happened in 2013. Now, remember at the beginning here, I talked about certifications. That's only to say that a certified lien will be filed of record that'll go with your title. When you sell your house, it'll show up of record when you do something. The fact that there's an outstanding water bill, that's always out there. So the question is, we have two questions here. We have a problem in the past that we're here trying to solve today, right? And then we have a problem going forward. How do we solve this from happening going forward again? Now, the finance director hopefully will certify every year going forward, but I think I'm going to put a request for council action in also that says that if there's any new water account open in the city, no water account will be opened unless all prior bills have been paid in full. That way, if somebody buys a house and says, I want to open a water account, the answer will be no, not until the bill's paid. And the buyer will say, this is ridiculous. Then the people should say, talk to your seller, talk to the tenant, have them pay it, and then we'll open the account. Because I think that, in the long run, will protect everybody. Because we have to figure a way to solve that problem. Because these other unpaid water bills will stay out there, as you know, forever. So what do we do about them? So we on council have to make a determination of what we do with them. The water's been used. There's a legal obligation to make sure from somebody that represented the potential buyer of a property that they check this. Even if it's multiple owners down the road, somebody should be making this call and ask the question, is there any unpaid water bills on this property? If that didn't occur, well, of course, you would never know. And now we have this certification of lien. The problem with this certification that we have now, and there are several now, mind you, you guys probably haven't seen this, but there is a chart here that talks about different years. In 2013, there's about 38 of them. In 2014, there's a little less, maybe about 27, and you go on, and these are all the people that received the letter that said, you didn't pay, you owe money. And some of the people that are in yellow here are paid already, right? They've already paid. So there's a lot of people here who have paid, and, you know, the question is, well, what does that mean? What do we want? Why, why are we here? I'm so frustrated. How could this happen in our city? Who dropped the ball? Who made the mistake here? Well, the answer to that question is really twofold. There was a mistake made at the beginning when everybody bought their houses. Somebody should have told the purchaser that they had this obligation. If there's unpaid water bills, that's going to be a lien on your property. That's the law in Ohio. That's the way it goes. And I think it's a law in many states that if you buy a property, if you're a landlord or if you're just a regular homeowner, you're subject to your tenants not paying water bills. Like, as a landlord, if my tenant doesn't pay a water bill and they leave, I'm responsible for it as a landlord. It doesn't disappear. And I have an obligation then to call up and ask, hey, did my tenant pay the water bill or not? Because if they didn't pay the water bill, I have their security deposit, I'm just going to take it out of that and pay the water bill. That's usually how that happens with the landlord. Now, a lot of people don't do that on an ongoing basis, and they wouldn't know that, right? They wouldn't know, I didn't know I had to do that. I mean, these are tough things that everybody has to learn. And I know many people out here today that came to the meeting, and those who did not, are very, very frustrated in the fact that, why am I receiving this letter? This letter relates to somebody that is 2 property owners ago. This letter relates to somebody 10 years ago. This letter relates to somebody that, I don't even know. Or maybe the letter relates to somebody that I bought from the seller, but I put the money in the escrow and they didn't use it to pay the water bill. Where'd the money go? A lot of issues surrounding the problem that was created. Again, the certification from the finance department that Keith Durham was responsible for that went out should go out every year. It did not. It went out last time in 2013, so you had 10 years where nobody got a letter. That's the frustrating part, right? If you got a letter every year, maybe you wouldn't be so frustrated. You'd probably still be mad, but maybe not as frustrated of, why am I waiting 10 years for this letter? I agree with you. That shouldn't happen. That is not something that should occur. That should happen every year. We have something on the books regarding that. So the question today is that we got this meeting together is to decide, what do we do about this? What do we do? How do we solve this problem? Do we waive everybody's account? Do we say, oh, this is a bad thing, we're going to waive it? But what about those people who paid? Do they just lose out and they paid and they get stuck with paying? Or what do we do? I mean, there's a fairness issue that we as a council have to make a determination. And there's 7 of us, that's why there's 7 of us. We all have differing opinions on how this should be handled. My proposal would be generally that, we understand that these bills are frustrating. I think the water was used, it may not have been used by the current property owner, it may have been used by a previous property owner. Who's at fault? I don't know. It could have been a previous broker from another sale ago. Who didn't check with the city to make sure that these water bills were paid? But the question is, if there's penalties and interest, my proposal would be, we waive the penalties and interest on all these bills. We don't let it have to be paid within 30 days. I say you have a year to pay them, because it seems very unfair to me that you're just learning about something and you may have to pay $150 in 30 days. That just seems kind of onerous to me. You should have time to pay it. But should it be waived? That's tougher for me as a real estate lawyer, because I know what the law is and what was supposed to happen when you buy a house. But I do understand the frustration of, how come I didn't know about this? How come nobody told me about this? How come either my broker didn't tell me? How come somebody should have said something that water bills are liens against properties automatically, because they run with the land and aren't like a utility bill and gas bill? But from a history perspective, that's kind of what happened. So when Keith's office sent out those letters, they went back since 2013, and that's why all the people on this list, and I don't know, Kathy, if there's other lists back there that people can look at, if there's extra ones in the back, if you wanted to look at them, all these people were notified on these different pages of, hey, you have an unpaid water bill. And then when you got that letter, you're probably looking at it saying, I paid all my water bills, what is this? That's where the frustration comes into play. And I understand a lot of individuals, including probably those who are in attendance today, called the finance department, spoke with the individuals handling the accounts, and I get it, you're frustrated. They got a lot of calls, and I'm sure they're frustrated with the calls saying, we can't do anything about it. We're trying to solve the problem. So it's up to us to solve that problem. And, my proposal again is that, and I'll let everybody else get an opportunity to speak about what their thoughts would be. But my proposal would be, of course, the water bills are due. We understand it. We understand that you're going to be upset and concerned of, why do I have to pay a water bill that wasn't mine? Well, it runs with the property. Unfortunately, that's the Ohio law. That's the way the law works in Ohio. And, I don't think you should have to pay it within 30 days. And I don't think, if you don't want to pay it and have a lien certified against you, I don't think that's the appropriate route either. But if you give you 12 months to pay it, or maybe longer, depends what council wants to say, to solve your problem and relieve some of the anxiety and frustration associated with this. Now, you're going to still be frustrated because you're going to say, I don't owe this bill. I agree with you. I'd be frustrated too. But I understand the issue that the water runs with the land. Unfortunately, that's the way it is in Ohio, and somebody in the process made a mistake when you bought the house, whether it be through a landlord buying a commercial property or whether it be through a residence buying a residential property. Somebody made the mistake. The mistake made at the city level was the certification didn't happen every year. Now, the certification only puts third parties on notice that there's a lien on your property. You're lien now. You can't refinance your house. You can't sell your house. You can't do anything until that lien is paid. That's what that does. So there's a little bit of difference between those two dichotomy of those items that occurred. But I guess I want to leave it to council and get your thoughts and opinions on this. I know I thought about this a lot, and I spoke with some of you about it. I know it's frustrating. I received several calls myself and spoke with several different people who called me very frustrated about it. And I said, I agree with you. I'm frustrated about it too. I'm a resident here. I'm frustrated. This shouldn't happen. We should be better than this. So I don't know what everybody thinks. Denny, you can start off.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I'd like to start off by saying the finance department, the staff at the finance department do a phenomenal job. I mean, they really and truthfully do.
His staff is amazing.
Overall, I in my heart of hearts, I believe Mr. Durham does a good job for the city, and he's done a good job for the tenure that he's been here. I do believe that the ball was dropped on this. So whether it was you or somebody else in the city, I think the city's responsible for this mistake. You're not the one that's responsible for it. And I understand what Mr. Coyne, I did speak to Mr. Coyne, and he advised me that when, just like he said, when somebody buys a piece of property, that they should come to the city and say, is there any outstanding water bills from the previous owners? I've owned several properties in the city of Medina, and I told him I'm not a stupid person, but I never knew that. I never did that on the properties that we bought, which I don't think is uncommon for most people. You rely on the experts, like Mr. Coyne said, to do that for you. That's why you, when you sell your property or purchase a property, that money's set aside. So in saying that, and I know this is affecting all our taxpayers, and I do take that into consideration because the money that is in rear here affects all the taxpayers. I would like the service director, the finance director, should have the ability. I talked to one gentleman today that was a previous finance director in Kent and someplace out west, Tulsa or someplace, that said, if the person that owned the property before you did lives someplace in Medina County and they have an electric or gas account, that we should be able to locate them and send them, the certified letter that they owe that. I would like to see that accomplished to try to recoup some of this funds. And I know, Mr. Durham is, like I said, he's an intelligent person. I know this won't happen in the future. But I personally would like to see us try to recoup as much as possible from the people that actually use the water and incurred this bill. I would be in favor of waiving, and I know it's costly, waiving the amounts that did not live on this property when these bills occurred. I would ask to waive those. The ones that have already paid, if they did not live at that property when this bill occurred, I think we should reimburse them.
What about the previous 10 years? I think then we'd have to go back and see in the previous 10 years, like in 2015, did somebody pay when they didn't own the property? So there would be a lot of work involved in that, because I don't think it would be fair to waive these when all the other people paid. I think we'd have to do a study to go back and figure out how many other people paid that should get reimbursed. Because
Yeah,
that
I
would seem
understand
fair.
I understand what you're saying. That would be difficult,
thought-
but,
It would be
Red
difficult, but it
meant
seems
paid.
fair.
right. And if we have the ability to do
Or
that,
the yellow.
But we may have to hire outside people then, maybe to come in, and it's gonna cost
Okay.
thousands of more dollars to solve the problem. I just think it'd be very unfair to waive these fees without taking into consideration all the other people the last 10 years who paid just because they said, I'm just paying. That seems
well, they
unfair.
didn't, for the past 10 years, they didn't get this certified letter. So if in the
Yeah,
past.
but they
in the-
still may have paid when they called up, somebody who called up on the phone that says, yeah, you owe this money because you're buying this house, there's an outstanding bill, and they paid it.
Can I ask you, Mr. Durham, does that happen a lot where people do call and say,
Yes.
it does happen a lot?
We get emails daily from title searches, checking this property, check this property, et cetera.
So that's what I was talking about here. The solution's a tough solution, because
It
it's
is.
not fair just to waive people, just because, oh, we're gonna waive it, because there's so many other people involved. This is a pervasive issue that goes for many years, and many people who called and stuff. So if you didn't call, you're rewarded, but if you did call, you're punished. I don't think that's fair. That's my personal opinion.
And I agree with you. And in any other, like I said, in any circumstance where it was the user's fault that this occurred, I don't have a problem putting a lien on their property. But I don't know how many people here by show of hands, I know there's not that many of you here, but how many people here by show of hands got this letter and these costs occurred before you owned the property?
All of them.
Right. So,
Essentially, that's gonna be everybody, because as a practical matter, if you're still there, you don't pay, we shut off the water, you can't get it turned back on without paying. So I mean, as a practical matter, there are no delinquent
Right.
accounts unless there's been a transfer of the
yeah.
property.
And I just feel in my heart of hearts, and I know it's gonna be costly. I just feel that this was the city's mistake, that these letters didn't go out since 2013.
We understand. I
you.
appreciate that. Reggie?
Yeah, we have questions before you can.
So, this is ugly, in my opinion. I will tell you that I have owned multiple homes in my past, and I was made aware that I was responsible for the water bill. So I guess fortunately, I had good representation that informed me that I owed the water. Every utility bill has been in my name since I've been an adult, so I knew exactly what I owed, and so I never had this problem, but I knew that a lien could be placed on my property if my water bill was not paid, and I did pick up the phone, and I called, I came up here, I paid my water bill, I took care of it. I personally was aware of this. So I'm sure there are people that were not made aware of it. My feeling on this is, and again, I'm here to represent my constituents, which I sometimes don't feel are just the ones in Ward 3. It's all of the constituents in the city. And if we waive what is owed, and per this report, it's what, $34,000, I'm not sure, Keith, what those numbers are. So if I look at a number and it has a balance, what exactly is that balance? Is that just the water portion? Is it the total, which is the water portion plus fees and penalties? What is that number?
We bill water and sanitation. John had mentioned penalties and interest also. There are no penalties and interest after the account is final. There are during the regular course of business. The way our bills work is it's 10% if not paid by the due date.
But, okay, that's my
So-
question.
Do these
So
numbers
there's,
include
so these
that?
numbers
So it will
include
be the
those
total
penalties
bill.
and fees
Right.
in total. I would hate to, I don't want to waive the water portion of the bill, because that is money that has been paid by the city as it was consumed. I paid mine, thousands of other people in the city have paid their bills. If we waive that money, that's money that is taken away from the city that we can use for other things. What I am in agreement of doing is waiving all of the fees and penalties and just asking for the water portion of the bill.
Are you comfortable with having a term of payment then, or?
I'm fine with that, because as I look through this, I see here's one for $51.56, but then as you go through the list, someone has a $800 water bill. That might be hard to come up with in a short period of time for someone. So I would be fine with
Okay.
allowing them a payment plan to pay this.
Ms. Hazeltine?
Thank you. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but before I continue, I want to make sure that I have these numbers correct. So if we collect all of these bills that are due by the current homeowner, looks like it's $34,858.09, correct? That's the number that is owed by all these people.
I believe so. It's changed a little bit because some of the people that have called us, we typically know if they're a sheriff's sale, but I know we've had a few people who've called us who have shown us that they were a sheriff's sale that we weren't aware of, or there was a bankruptcy that we weren't aware of. So I know some have come off, but that's,
Yeah, and remember, we talked about that earlier, what we normally have done, if there's a bankruptcy or there's a sheriff's sale, we can't, even if there's a lien filed, we can't go in front of that, because the property's transferred free and clear. So
Yes.
those are a little different situations. There are not as many of those, but they do occur.
I just want to know the number that the city would have to waive for all these people that are getting bills that weren't their fault. Is that number that almost $35,000 minus a few random, maybe
I
a couple
believe that, I
$100?
believe that's correct.
So it's close to $3,500. Do you know, or thousand, sorry. Do you know the amount that it would cost us to refund all of the people back to 2013 who paid their water bills? Is that the amount here, 5,423?
The yellow.
The ones that got the letter you're talking about.
The ones that got the letter and had already
Of-
paid?
Of the ones who got the letter, yeah. I guess, we were talking earlier about people whose title companies paid, and that I have no idea, because
Right,
we don't
there's
have
differences.
that.
Those people who received the letter and paid, which is 5,400, but then there's those people who called in and paid the bill because they before they opened an account, made the phone call and said, oh, the previous owners didn't pay, I'm paying it. They didn't get a letter or anything, they just did that.
Okay, so that should not
and
be
the-
on
The
here
problem
then.
is, no, it's not on that list.
Yeah, and it shouldn't
And the
be.
problem is, because it came up,
Yes.
I don't even know that we I don't know that we even could figure that out. Because to go back through the accounts, we keep a record of when they're paid, but we don't keep a record of who paid it.
No,
So in other words,
right, that's
if,
my point,
if,
right.
if John sold a house to me, when John's account got paid at the end of that account, we keep a record that it was paid, but I would have no way of determining if it was paid by John on his way out or by Keith because he found, I'd have no way of knowing that.
Right, that's great. Or if you sold a house to me and your previous owner where you bought it from didn't pay and you didn't pay, and then I paid it, we would have no idea.
Right,
The
right.
whole point is it's gonna be very difficult, but the whole point that I was making, it's just unfair throughout the spectrum. It's just not fair.
So okay, this list, the letters that were sent out, what if we give a partial credit back to the people that did pay? That way, it's reducing the cost to the city. I'm sorry, it's not reducing the cost to the city, it's reducing hold on. It is repaying and, kind of helping the person that paid the bill that really wasn't theirs. So we're refunding them a flat amount, a percentage, however you want to do it. So maybe not the whole amount, but we're taking some of it off. We're eating it. It was our fault. I 100% believe that.
When you say our fault, it's not our fault. It's Keith Durham's department. It's his fault. Why do you keep
I'm
saying it's
not
our
trying,
fault?
okay, I meant as a
He's an elected
city.
official.
Okay, this is true. So, not to call it out all on Keith, but those letters should have been sent out yearly, so we wouldn't be going back 10 years. These people have no idea where it's coming from. It's not fair to them. The private citizens are not Medina City's bill collectors. They're not. We need to say, you owe this money.
But don't
We
you
are
think?
not in charge of collecting that money.
Well, you're missing the one point. When you buy a house, you're obligated to check if there's an outstanding water bill. So you're saying ignorance of law is a defense?
I have a question.
I don't think that a large percentage of our citizens are even aware of this, and that falls on the city as well for not notifying them. We had many chances to collect these bills, many chances. We could have sent them letters on a yearly basis. People that did the right thing, if we're going to, take some of this debt on, and we could even take on a portion, just like we're doing to make it fair. Whatever percentage you want to do, whatever dollar amount, we take that off the owed amount as well, if you don't want to refund the entire amount. But looking at this spreadsheet at the $35,000, you're telling me that our city, looking at the numbers, our operating budget, cannot afford to give our citizens $35,000 out of our entire budget, how big it is. We are very fiscally secure to give $35,000 back to our residents whom we were elected to serve, whom Keith was elected to serve, and the city, whether you want to say Keith, whoever, dropped that ball. That responsibility is not our residents. Like I said, the residents are not the city's bill collectors. Finance is in charge of collecting our bills.
But don't you think this is going to open up this huge can of worms from people who paid their bills because
That's why
they
I
knew
said
they
we
were?
give them a credit. The same credit we're giving the people.
But that's going to be,
I wanna
a
go
ro-
next. I just have a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's gonna be
Okay,
a nightmare.
Okay, thanks. Bill, your question.
Okay, my question is, can we give our opinions without having to discuss your other council people's take on our own opinions? I mean, we have been,
sure,
as each of us, Denny and Jess and Reggie have given their opinion, there's been a cross discussion. It seems like it would be beneficial to making our decision if when each of us are talking, we don't have to debate each other, because it's,
Well, somebody may have a comment or question to get more clarification of your opinion, but that's
okay.
But you're
Thank
next, though. Go ahead.
Well, I wasn't done, but
Oh, you're not
that's okay.
finished? Oh,
No.
okay, go ahead.
My final thought here is, the mistake is all on us, on the city, whether you want to say it's on the finance department. Those people elected Keith with the expectation that he would operate the finance department like I would have to look and see how other cities do it, But I imagine they do very similar, sending out yearly notices. Why did it take us 10 years to realize that those notices were not going out? Why? Yes.
Thank you.
The answer to that question is, we got a letter from an attorney I know complaining about a past due bill that was 8 years ago.
Yes.
And I went back to talk to Jenny, and I think it was a couple $100, and he advised in his letter to us that he never received a notice of any bill due at all, and he's a landlord. And when I went through the paperwork that Keith was able to provide me, I couldn't show, if I had to defend the city on the issue, and this attorney was upset enough to push the issue, I wouldn't be able to defend that he actually received a notice. We don't, the way we document our notice on that issue is a little thin, in my opinion.
Then we need to make it better.
So
need
we
to do
took it to
better.
the Board of Control, it was only a couple $100, and we waived it. And he wasn't required to pay it. And I asked Jenny, why is this not being certified? Because when I started as a law director under Jane, we were certifying these every year. And Jenny told me, we haven't certified these since 2013, which I had no idea about. Nobody ever asked me about that. And this was only 6 weeks ago.
I want to know why it took that long.
So I went back and I looked at the ordinance, and the ordinance says you shall certify. So I went in to see Keith, and I told him, this is mandatory. This is not discretionary. You have to do this every year. And to this day, as I understand it, I think Vanita would go in to see Keith every year and ask, are we certifying? And she was told, no, we're not certifying this year, starting in 2013. Now, you'll have to ask Keith why he came to that conclusion. He never talked to me about it. And I don't know why he did that, because we were doing it for 10 years up to 2013, and I don't know to this day why we stopped doing it.
So you're saying that an elected official has a law that he needs to follow, and it was chosen not to follow for 10 years?
That's correct.
Keith?
Thank you. When I first came into this office, certifications I caught up on, they were behind. My understanding of this law was that we did certifications. My understanding was not that we were required to do them annually. Now, it's on me, it should never have gotten as far behind as it got. We had done certifications in 13. We have a file, we were preparing to do certifications in 17. And at that point, a number of things happened and we didn't get back to it. And we should have, and that's on me. But, Greg's informed me now that we have to do this every year, and going forward, we most certainly will. But we didn't do that for that time.
So, Mr. Huber, you're saying that you recently approached Keith and said, why are we not doing this anymore? Or you did in that case in 2013?
I'm not sure I understood the question. Say that again.
I'm asking if the incident you were referring to when you said, this is a law you're supposed to follow, was that 6 weeks ago when you first found out about it, or was it something that
was
a
6
resident
weeks-
brought up in 2013?
6 weeks ago when I found out
Okay.
about it. So, right.
So, Keith, how long have you been in office? You were in office in 2013, correct?
Right.
Okay. So when you took over, you made sure to catch up on the past years, but then stopped continuing the practice that is required by law.
Prior to 13, and I don't know exactly what years we did, but I don't think we did every year. We had caught up and then we did every couple of years. I thought that was acceptable under the law.
Okay, I guess my next question would be, Mr. Huber is here to serve as our legal counsel. And if you did not understand the law or there was any question as to how often it had to be done, I, as an elected official and a public servant, would ask our law director, am I interpreting this correctly? And that did not happen.
No, and as I said, Mr. Huber has informed me that, yes, this needs to be done every year, and it will be going forward.
I mean, there's nothing on your account to be done differently. It's passed. Now we need to rectify what is essentially your mistake. So it's a tough issue. You're an elected official, but the city pays you out of tax dollars of our residents. So do we, I don't know where that responsibility lies. All I know is that someone was supposed to do a job and they didn't do it. It's not like there's any repercussions for it because you are an elected official. I'm very disappointed that someone that was elected by our residents is clearly not serving the residents, especially in this case. You know, whenever people call me on the weekend, whatever, I'm so sorry to disturb you. That's my job. That's what I'm here for. You are not disturbing me. So not doing my job is a very difficult concept for me to grasp when you are, as we reviewed recently last year, compensated very well for the work that you do. So moving forward, again, my proposal, and we can discuss it without debate or whatever. This is just an idea. Hear all the ideas, go back and converse. But if you don't, I personally think we eat the money. It was our fault. We make it fair, we pay everybody back. We spend $35,000 on things that I consider unnecessary, and I've indicated that during those council meetings. Decorative things that people have come and asked for their neighborhoods, all kinds of things that they're not necessary. And we justify, I can think of a specific incident where we spent $30,000 on something that I felt was completely unnecessary because a group of about 12 people came and asked us to. How many people are in this room and how many people are on that list? 38,000 or $35,000 plus any percentage of reimbursement, whatever. We can take that out of our budget. It was 100% our fault that these people are in this position. Either we decide on a percentage or a solid dollar amount to reimburse everyone if as a council, we decide that we do not want to fully reimburse all of the people who receive these letters. A $50 credit, a $100 credit, for most of these people would pay it off. And we can certainly afford that small number if we decide to do that, even including the people who did. And we can limit that to 2013 plus, the last 10 years. But that would be my proposal. Either we eat it because it's our fault, we reimburse everyone, the people who didn't pay, the people who did. If you'd like to pursue the debt with the landlords or the previous tenant, that's something else you can do, but I think that if they've moved, it would be very difficult to track down where they now live or to get a hold of them. If you think that is a worthwhile use of our finance department's time to chase after those people and attempt to collect, certainly that would be financially more, actually, I don't know the numbers. It's just something that we could try. Basically, my full idea is eat it. If we're not going to eat it, we take on a percentage or a dollar amount of all these people that are past due, and we give that dollar amount to people that did pay.
Thank you. Mr. Lamb?
Thank you. I've got a number of comments, I guess. They're not in any specific order. But I think with Denny and Jess, I mean, I see this not particularly as just the problem with the finance director, because we wanted, this is brought up that we are the finance director is required by law to do this. I don't know if anybody in the audience has ever seen the ordinance book. How many laws are in the ordinance book? It's about that thick.
But it's your job to look at it.
There's a lot of laws in the ordinance book, and I guarantee you that everybody on council and everybody in the administration does the very best they can to try to comply with those things that are required by law, because that's what those ordinances are. They're actually just laws. But there is no way you cannot sometimes not comply, because there's a lot of laws. And it's easy to blame the finance director because we have this issue, but council is the group that actually, we hold the purse strings here. We are responsible for a lot, even though, I mean, the Mayor Hanwell is independently elected, the finance director is independently elected, but we are the finance people. You know, we hold the purse strings. All the money that goes anywhere comes from us. Any rate that's set comes from us. So since 2013, none of us, and 4 of us have been here since 2013. None of us ever said, hey, have we certified these water bills? I know I never did. So in a real sense, I mean, I guess I feel as responsible because we have an obligation as well to understand the laws and what's in that ordinance book. And further, if I got a bill that was 10 years old from anybody, I would question, not only question it, I would wonder why I even got the bill and why I have to pay it.
Quite frankly, I'd ignore it.
And you can't ignore this, but I think we can't just pass this along, because it's different if somebody has paid this, 8 years ago, or 9 years ago. But to get the bill now, 10 years on, and if you look at the length of the discussion we've had now, and the complication about some of the ideas that have been offered, the cost simply in time and people power to try to adjudicate some of these bills, who paid, who do we refund, I think if you put all that together, and if you just took this room right now and added up the time that we are here and the salaries that people here make, all this is just money churned up. So let's churn up some more and spend some more. If it's a 10-year-old bill and no one on city council ever questioned the fact that we have not done this, it is the finance director's responsibility, but it's our responsibility as well. And it appears to me that the thing that we can do, and sometimes things are just not fair. All of us have lived fairly long lives. Lots of things aren't fair, but sometimes it just is the right thing to do. And instead of just trying to lay fault, blame, I think that if we can refund something in a way that's not going to be too costly where we can, and other than that, I think we should say, let's start to certify it, make sure we certify every year, and maybe we ought to take a look at it every year and make sure that somebody remembers that we should raise our hand and ask, have we certified the water bills? And then we can move on. Because it's inappropriate to me that we would pursue this now. And I understand what the President of Council is saying. I mean, it's logical, exactly what you're saying. It's smart. We're lucky to have you here. I've always thought you're probably one of the best people to be in the position that you're in because of the great work you've done for this city with regard to finances. There's just no question about it. I've never understood why we have our pictures on that wall. But, well, I don't mean you guys' pictures. Yeah. But why we don't, because the work you have done here is it's not that it's commendable, it's just it has mattered so significantly to the city. But in this case, I think that when we're looking at about $35,000, I think that this is where we can find a better way to do it and make sure that we move forward in a way that's more reasonable and practical and does follow the ordinance as we go forward. And I guess I just see it as being our problem. It's all of our problem because we are a big part of this thing. We can't just point the finger at the finance director. Thank you.
Thank you,
I just have a
Mr.
really
Rose.
quick comment.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I just wanted to ask a question.
Bill did bring up a good question. Did any of us do this? No, we didn't, okay? I'll be the first to raise my hand. But every year, we write a really big check to REA and Associates or the auditor's office to audit our books. But not once did the auditors come to us to tell us, this isn't happening. So the only time we do anything is when the auditors tell us we have a failure here, and whatever that may be. Okay? So if the auditors aren't checking this, how do we know that we're supposed to check it? All right? So part of the blame, take a little bit from Keith, they're the auditors. Okay? I think if we pay anything here, we should go back to them and say, hey, where's our money? You didn't tell us this wasn't happening. Okay? So don't, Keith, because they're supposed to be checking what we're doing to make sure. And if this is something like a standardized test in schools where you're only going to be tested on these things, and that's all you ever do, all this other stuff could go away. Maybe we need to have another company, completely different, come in and check all of our books from A to Z to make sure that we're not missing anything here, that we're not staying to some sort of regular standard that happens year after year after year. Okay? And Mr. Huber, is there a statute of limitations on how far back we can go with these things?
We looked at that. I did not find a statute of limitations. It's a lien, a water lien. It's water used. It's owed to the taxpayer. The only entity that can waive that would be the council. I couldn't do it. The mayor couldn't do it. Keith doesn't have the authority. We discussed that. But basically, it's either you process the certification or you waive it.
Okay, thank you. And then with regard to a couple of the letters that I received, there were examples that in the closing of the property, monies were held or withheld to cover the water bill. Okay, so in that case there, the contract was between the buyer and the seller with the closing company. So in that regard there, the city's not responsible for that. It's the closing company who's responsible for making sure that that happened. Now, okay, what happened to that money? If the seller didn't pay the water bill and the buyer didn't pay the water bill, did the closing company pocket the money? And if they did that, then there's a bigger problem. And we need to go after them. Yes, sir.
One of the things I still don't understand in this situation, as I understood it, if there's a past due water bill, we send out a notice and we shut off the water, and we do that regularly. So I have not known how it is that there's past due water bills and notices haven't been sent out and the water shut off. And then, so why didn't the water get shut off? I don't know the answer to that. Doesn't make sense to me. And the second question is, if you've got a new owner who's transferring water, how do we transfer water and allow this to continue to the new homeowner without this coming up? Because we don't just transfer to new people without somebody looking at these books. So I've been at a loss on this whole situation as to how we got so far into it.
And I kind of agree to that point there, I agree with Mr. Coyne that we need to set up a process, though, that it doesn't switch to the new until the old is taken care of. That, I think, will stop that. With regard to the whole thing in general, I feel for you because, I've changed properties a couple of times and spent time fighting with the closing entity, whatever it was, the closing company, making sure that, I had my fair share taken care of and the like. So I do agree that it is incumbent upon the person responsible for whatever the bills are to make sure that they're being paid properly and not to come to, to this situation here where, out of the blue, here's a 10-year-old water bill that nobody was expecting. I don't think that the government should be the backstop for this type of thing. Is it the city's fault? Kinda. Is it the closing company's fault? Kinda. Okay, is it the buyer and seller's fault? Kinda. There's a lot of culpability here. It's not 100% the city. Okay? I do believe most of it goes to the closing company, whoever that may have been, whether it was your bank, the lawyer, whoever, the real estate agent, whoever that may have been, because they're the ones who are supposed to make sure that all this is done so the final funds are distributed properly. So I would be in favor of Mr. Coyne's proposal in waiving any interest and penalties that may be there and give up to 12 months to pay for those bills, and give the residents who are paying these bills any and all help they can to go after the closing company if funds were withheld during the closing, to recoup your money from them where the money sits or did sit at one time.
Thank you. Jim?
Can I ask, following up on Mrs. Hazeltine, when you asked about the 35,000, how much of that 35,000, Keith, is interest and penalties? You know that?
I mean, I can guess. Before we do a shut-off, we run 2 penalties. It's 10% each time, so it'd probably be about 20%, but some of these would have been finalized without ever having a penalty, and some of them would have been,
okay.
would have rolled
That's
longer, so it's a complete guess.
Okay, but let's say it's 7,000. Now we've taken 35 down to 28,000. And I do apologize to all of you, because I would be just as upset as you were if I got this. And I'm thankful right now, I'm an attorney, just like Mr. Coyne, and I understand everything he's saying about the legal obligation, and I'm thankful. When I bought my house, I had a really good title agent, and they took care of all these things, and it was handled. Obviously, something broke down in all of your situations, but it's certainly one of the other big breakdowns was on our end here at the city, for you get a notice 10 years later, and I don't feel comfortable with going back 10 years in some of those situations and making you pay the price for that when it wasn't anything that you were in control of. So I get it, Mr. Coyne, the interest and penalties, but I'm kind of leaning toward, we're down to 28,000 when you take the interest and penalties out of here for something that is none of these people's fault. So I feel like I just can't go back and ask everybody to do this.
So it looks like there's,
It's the legal side versus the common
Right,
sense
I know.
side. I'm just going to say that.
well, the question is, it sounds like there's 4 that want to waive. So if the 4 that want to waive, are you willing to reimburse the people who paid or don't want to do that? Because I just want to get a motion on the table here.
Well-
We don't know that number.
Yeah, we know it's 5,000. The people who paid off of this list right now is the end number is $5,423.60.
And these are the people that received the letter.
And paid.
Yeah.
So we know who these people are, so
Yes.
that's
Yeah,
easy enough to do the repayment.
Right.
Yeah.
That should be easy.
So the answer
And
is
that 5,000 came out of the 35,000, or it's 35,000 plus 5?
35 plus 5. It was
But we've
40
taken it down
originally.
to 28.
So now we're at 33 now, right? We're back up to 33. But if you guys 4, because it sounds like it's gonna be 4-3, if that's what you want to do, you have to make the motion to waive the fees plus reimburse all the people who paid.
Okay. Keith, I have a question. So the people that got this bill, the 10-year bill, we know who the people are that paid.
Right.
Yes.
So do we know who the people are that paid earlier? That did before they got the bill, and is that a no?
No, we really don't.
We can't do
Because-
that one.
Because like I said in the example we gave before, if you sold your house to Paul and your final bill was paid at the end of the account, I obviously can go back and have a record that your final account was paid. We don't track who paid it. So I have no
Right.
way of knowing if it was paid by you before you left, or if Paul's title company or Paul came in and said, hey, I bought this property, I want to know if there's a bill, and paid it. We don't track that it was Bill versus Paul. We don't care. We just collect the money, and that's the end of the account. So no, I
Okay,
can't
so
figure
that
out.
part we can't, so that part we can't do. That part we can't do. I have just one more question. And Mr. Huber brought this question up, I guess, and it's pretty fascinating. How is it then, how do we change the water bill to a new buyer, and there's a water bill from the old buyer, so the house really still has 2 water bills? How does that happen?
Yes.
In our system, and Mr. Coyne proposed, which if we're allowed to do it, I think would be fine, that we just say you've got to pay before you take over. In the current ordinances, we don't have the authority to do that. And the way our system works, just so you know, the last 2 digits of the account number are just a sequential number for, at that address. So whatever the address is, that account number stays, and then the last 2, the first account in the system was 0001, et cetera. So back to my you sold your house to Paul example, if your account was 00, when you closed out and Paul came in to sign up for service, he was 01. And we opened that 01 account regardless of whether or not there was a bill still owed on the 00 account.
Right, because remember, you got 30 days to pay your bill, so if you close on the 30th, the seller does not necessarily have to pay before you take title to your house.
Right.
And usually the seller says, I'm not paying, I'm just leaving.
Well, and that's a complication that, to understand if we were to try to do that, because when, in that example, when Paul signs up for service, your account may be open, we may not even have a final bill for your account yet.
Right.
And that's frequently the case, because when the new buyer, so look, just using that example, if Paul's the new buyer, he comes in and says, I want to sign up for service starting August 1st. Well, we just sign him up for service and give him that account. Your account hasn't been closed yet. We don't even have a final bill. We haven't even, you aren't even done yet. Then we take the reading, then we send you a final bill. So, I mean, those bills wouldn't be necessarily, if we did that, it wouldn't be before they started service. It would be more like a month or 2 after they started service, because we'd send that final bill to Bill, and then if he didn't pay it and it became delinquent, then we could say, okay, we're rolling this onto the next account, and at that point, let Paul know, hey, there's this bill and you're gonna have to pay it.
Okay, so it's really a timing thing is what you're talking about. Because you're really, after the 2 months is up, you've got 2 bills from the same address. Right. I don't want to belabor this, but it's not clear to me how, I appreciate your explanation, but it just wasn't clear to me how we ended up with, how that would go forward with 2 bills.
Well, I think that if I'll put a request in and we can discuss that to try to solve
Sorry,
that
I didn't mean
problem
to
going
go
forward.
on.
I think that needs to be done.
Don't
But I guess
understand.
Jim can make a motion, because I think, I think we had a discussion, I think we know where everybody stands, so I think we should. there's no
Just so
reason
we
to be-
clarify with that motion, what time frame are we looking at? Are we not including the ones that would be certified this year, even if we'd done certifications last year? We need to know that.
Did you do certifications?
Keith, did this
last
stuff already go over to the auditors?
Before we vote, I just have a couple questions.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. To Councilman Lamb, you kind of mentioned the hours paid to the staff if we go back and if we do all this and all the tracking involved. A very valid point, but what we can do is operate off of these people that received the letters. So we know where those people are, like we know we can refund them. We know, yes, right here in the audience is people who got the letter. So based off this spreadsheet that we have, we can do, what I would like to do. We can refund whichever way we decide to do it based off of this spreadsheet. This is information that we have. We can only operate off of information that we have. But, you said it's going to cost money. We're going to have to put this onto the finance department staff. Didn't we already pay for that when this was supposed to be happening, but the time was utilized differently?
I'm not understanding that question.
I don't either.
If whoever, finance department to be in general, they were supposed to be doing something and they didn't. In this case, it would be that they were supposed to be sending these letters and they didn't do that. So they were, or rather, the elected official, were already paid for time that they weren't doing what they were supposed to.
I hear
So
you.
that
Okay.
money has been paid out already.
Right.
It will still cost more for us to do this, but in reality, it should have been done. And like a lot of you have said, the buck stops at Keith. He's in charge of that department. He oversees, make sure everything is done the way that it's supposed to. As far as Paul's comment about REA, they can only audit after we give them the information and tell them what they need to look for. They're not responsible to make sure that we are complying with any and all ordinances. That's not their job. Now, the auditor, I'm not sure. That could be a different thing. They might be more familiar with the laws, but the accounting service, we tell them what we need from them. They can only work off the information that we give them. If you give them a partial toolbox and ask them to do a job that they need an additional tool for, they can't do it. Is anyone listening, or are they just talking amongst
No,
themselves?
no, he's had this question. thing.
So that, you know, those are a couple points that I wanted to bring up. And also, what if people bring in a letter from their title agency that says, you know, this, or they have their original contract and it says, you know, this was paid for? What if they have that letter? Do we just, we would, I would assume, waive it? But who would we charge to recoup that money? The title agency?
Because
I would think that any anomaly that we have, and there would be some in the process, can be dealt with as it comes in. But if Councilman Shields is going to put together the language here of what we're doing, I think it's kind of what we have discussed is on this, we have this list to go with as the refund list.
Right.
And, right?
And I guess I was thinking, Keith, let me make sure this is practical, that everybody who got this original letter, who hasn't, will send out a letter saying, we're waiving it per council's ordinance here now. If you've already paid, which we know who's already paid, we've got to refund them a check. If you haven't paid, you no longer have that obligation to come in and pay.
And that's fine. Are you though including the people from 21 and 22?
My
Who
motion
got
was,
this letter?
No, stop.
yep, my motion was going to be 2013 to 2021, because the 2022 people should have just got their normal letter that we should have sent out in 23 to certify last year's, correct?
Yes.
So why wouldn't it be 22? Oh, I guess you would
22.
get 22
Because we're in
and
23 now, we would have
Okay,
certified
that makes sense.
22s.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you look, that's the smallest amount. But Keith, does that make sense then? Because the people who have not paid, they're going to get a letter saying you're no longer responsible because we have this database who got the original.
Right,
letters.
we can do that.
And
we
then
can
we'll
refund
send
the
it to
people who
everybody
did pay,
because we'll say
right.
if you've already paid, then you're entitled to a refund.
We'll just send them the refund.
Okay. All right. Before I make my motion, I do want to thank the finance department because I know
Yes.
this has not been easy for any of you. And I know you took a ton of calls with people that are angry and upset. And it is one of the finest. I think we started by Denny saying one of the finest group of people in the
Right.
city as far as employees. And I do appreciate it. And all of council appreciates everything you guys have done.
Are you open to some of our input?
No, we have to make the decision. We know the issue, so we're going to make the decision here,
I
so.
just thought that our input might be valuable to support maybe making that choice.
Well, I think the choice has already been made. If you've been listening, you know which way it's going.
Right.
That
So,
doesn't mean that we're gonna pay. So I guess I would like to provide some input.
I agree, I understand what you want to do, but I think we got to go ahead with the motion, so go
Well,
ahead.
I'm going to make a motion then from 2013 to 2021, we are going to waive the payment, the interest, the penalties, and anybody in that time period who received a letter that is already paid, we're going to reimburse them for already having paid since we're waiving this entire amount from 2013 to 2021. The 2022 people would have been certified in 2023. Going forward, you know, they'll have to still pay, and we will talk further at council about other ways to correct this, that it never happens again.
Second.
I have a
Okay,
question
any
about
further
the
discussion?
motion.
Yes, go
I
ahead.
can't vote on the motion until I answer this, get this question answered. So are you saying we're only waiving the penalty and interest, or are we waiving the entire amount?
The entire amount plus penalties and interest.
Thank
It's
you.
the original amount, penalties, interest, 2013 to 2021.
Okay.
Any other questions? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Hazeltine,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Rose,
No.
Shields,
Yes.
Simpson,
Yes.
Coin,
No.
Hare.
No.
Motion passes 4 yeas, 3 nays.
Okay. All right, guys, so the next thing we'll do is I'll put a request for council action in to change the law in Medina mandating that no account can be opened unless and until the previous owner pays. Now, if they complain about it, that's there on them, it's not on us. That's what we're gonna do. We're not gonna wait just 30 days. We're gonna say, no new account will be opened until the old bill is paid.
We're gonna have to tweak that, because we're not even gonna have the amount. for
Well,
the
you do,
old
you do
bill.
a final reading, there may be a time, maybe they gotta do, something different will happen in Medina. They'll do the final reading before it happens, or they'll pay the bill and then we can reimburse them. The seller will overpay. Say, I think I owe $200, I'm just gonna pay the $200, and then they'll overpay, and then you can reimburse them. I think that will solve a lot of the problems, because we can't be in this purgatory period of 30 days saying, they may pay, they may not pay.
Correct.
We're gonna solve that problem.
And I have one question along that line. I understand that the final reading may not take place till after, the contract has been delivered and the people are coming in to open up a new account. Is there any way possible, since most of our water meters are electronic now, is there any way possible when somebody comes in to say, I want to open up a water account, that you can say, well, I can do it in 24 hours, and you'll have staff to be able to go out and get a final reading?
The problem that's gonna come in with that is sometimes people come in advance. So if you come in to sign up for your account and say, hey, I bought this property, and because you have a transfer date, so you know your transfer date is August 1st, you come in to sign up for service, say, I want to sign up for an account as of August 1st. Well, obviously, I can't do a final bill
Well, we can just,
now.
we can notify them at the time that if there's an unpaid water bill, you're gonna be responsible. That'll be part of the deal when they sign it, to
Yeah.
say, yes, I agree to be responsible for all past water bills. I think
Okay.
that's just
And
the
then,
truth.
and then
So-
you, as the buyer, telling
Yep.
your escrow agent.
Exactly right,
that
yes.
This better be taken care
What-
of.
Yes, that's how it works.
What if we look at their past bills, come up with an average, and if they
No,
come in...
that's way complicated.
Hold on, or whatever number we decide, we can pick any number we want. But when they try to set up new water service, and they're not sure of the amount, and they have to wait to get the actual meter reading, there's a deposit of such and such amount.
Well, at that time, they can negotiate with the seller to an addendum to the purchase agreement that says, look, the city's telling me they don't know how much money you owe, I want to withhold the escrow another $300. And if the seller says no, then there's a fight between the buyer and the seller, not between the city.
Okay, so what if the reading
I feel like I'm in law
happens.
school.
And what if the reading happens on the date before that 30-day thing happens? What if we do a reading then, and then whatever comes after that, that 30 days after that, until they take ownership, the new owner is responsible for it?
We have a hand in
We're going to
it.
have a meeting on this, so we don't need to
John.
discuss the solution to the problem now, because we didn't even put the request for council action in yet. Is this related to that issue? We can discuss it at the meeting, because we're not going to make a decision on how that's going to happen tonight. So we're going to have another meeting on that specifically to discuss that. So
How it will work.
I appreciate everybody coming, and I'm glad that everybody came. I hope you come to other council meetings, because this is a lot of
She wants
fun.
to make a comment.
Yes, if you could go to the microphone, just give us a comment if it's real quick.
All right, I'm Vanita Bassman. I'm the utility billing clerk for the city of Medina. I've worked for the city for 30 years. I just want to commend everyone who showed up tonight, and I just wanted to ask that we further move along rather than belabor how we're going to rectify these situations, because I think there's some nuances that all of you would need to be aware of from the perspective of service and from the city's finance department. So thank you very much.
Yes, no, thank you, Benita.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, again, there's a council meeting coming up on the 28th
you,
of August, I
ladies.
believe. Hopefully, everybody comes. That'd be great.
Wait,
Thanks,
there's a
thank you.
committee meeting right after this,
Well, there's a
so,
committee meeting. You
know,
can stay and go to the
stick
water
around.
committee meeting after this. There's another one about increasing the rates of water. So, okay.